Welcome to the MBN Solutions Boss in Data podcast. My name is Robin Huggins. I'm Client Services Director for MBN Solutions, a recruitment, talent advisory and people solutions business based in Glasgow, Scotland. We specialise in solving talent problems in the data space by collaborating with a community of practitioners, managers, leaders, academics and enthusiasts. In each episode of our podcast, we'll take a deep dive into one of the topics currently challenging the data leaders within our community, with a special guest providing their input based on their background and experience in the data space. This episode, our topic is transitioning between academic and commercial data practice. The data industry traditionally encourages strong links between commercial organisations and academia. From guest lecturing to internships to research posts and incubator spinouts, the lines between what can be two very separate and distinct communities in other industries seem to be blurring more and more every year. However, there are some recognisable differences between the two domains, and with individuals transitioning between commerce and academia and vice versa on a regular basis, and data leaders seeking to gain any competitive advantage that they can in the pursuit of excellence, I thought it would be a useful exercise to take a deep dive into this area with an expert in the field. So I am beyond delighted to say that joining me today to discuss the topic in more detail is Dr. Jasmina Lazic, Head of Research and Development at Bigtincan and former Chief Data Technologist at the Base Centre, University of Edinburgh. Hello, Jasmina.
Hello, hello.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, not too bad.
Jasmina, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join me. I'm looking forward to a most excellent conversation. Jasmina, conscious of the fact that you and I have known each other for quite some time now, but that the audience won't. So could you tell us a little bit about your background? Where are you from? Your journey in data? Why did you choose to do what you do? All that kind of good stuff.
Right. So I currently work as Head of Research and Development at Bigtincan. So I'm leading a team of data scientists, data engineers, iOS developers, to build the cutting-edge solutions to transform the buying experience as we know it today. Obviously, there is lots of data science and AI involved in all that. Prior to that, I used to work as Chief Data Technologist at the Base Centre at the University of Edinburgh, where I was leading on the technical engagements on the data science and AI side with universities, strategic partners across the board. That was a number of years. I spent a number of years there. And before that, I used to work in a number of customer-facing consulting roles at a company called MathWorks. So data scientists will know that they are the developers of software, MATLAB and Simulink. So that was also a very good experience. That was my, well, possibly the first serious commercial experience after I graduated from my PhD. And my PhD was in applied mathematics, operations research. Yes, very technical, very computer sciencey. And my undergraduate was in mathematics and computer science. So I guess I've been lucky to be well equipped for a career in data science.
Why this field? I mean, has this been a dream since you were younger? Why have you ended up where you are now? And is this where you always wanted to be?
Well, I think ever since I've known myself, I love mathematics. I still love mathematics. I love solving puzzles. I love kind of solving problems and little challenges. And I was always into mathematics, but as I grew older through high school and university, I also wanted to see the applications of that mathematical theory in real life. And that was one of the reasons why I've chosen a kind of computer science branch when I went for my undergraduate degree. But yes, and I think mathematics, I do encounter mathematics still in my day-to-day work. I mean, there is plenty of statistics and plenty of logics and optimization. So it is like kind of the foundation of everything that I've been working in.
So that curiosity and problem solving interest has carried on from childhood, but now you do it for a job. You solve big complex problems for a job.
I do.
Yes. We spoke recently about some of your work, some of the work that you're doing at Bigtincan, that AI-based voice coaching tool in particular. Could you expand on what's involved in it?
So recently we have been working on the application called Voice Vibes. Voice Vibes is a speech delivery practice and coaching platform with automated feedback that helps users master new messages and sound more natural and polished when they speak, which in turn makes listeners much more likely to want to engage with them. So if you want to practice for a presentation, pitch, or public speech, you would record your audio, provide it to the software, and in turn, you'd get scores on things like how captivating you were, how assertive, boring, and so on. You'd also get tips and tricks on how to improve on your delivery. This software is currently available in English, but we have been working on scaling this up effectively to other languages. Now, coincidentally, I ran this little blurb through the Voice Vibes as I was preparing for this podcast.
Right.
And it turns out that my clarity score was 7.4 out of 10, and my vocal delivery was 7.1 out of 10. So I guess it's not all that bad. But just for fun, I'll read out my top tip.
Okay.
For improvements. So it says that you need to most work on pausing. Consider adding one or more dramatic pauses when you change topics or after a major point. Pro tip, people don't remember facts or lectures as well as they remember descriptions and stories. There you go.
This sounds cute. I need to speak to my boss for the next time I'm doing any presenting, pitching, and public speaking, and he needs to buy me this software. This is great. This sounds amazing. In terms of the role that you're in at the moment, then, how closely do you continue to work with academia? I'm assuming that within an R&D department, there would be strong ties with different learning institutions.
So we are a relatively young team, and we are still working out our processes and workflows, including how to collaborate best internally and externally. That said, I obviously have strong personal connections with academia, and we are looking into leveraging them as we grow. We are attending and presenting at various events, academic and commercial. We are also looking to set up internships and maybe looking at hackathons and other joint projects and activities further down the line.
Yeah, the first time you and I saw each other again after all that lockdown craziness was at one of these academic collaboration internship type events. So let's look now at that challenge, the differences between academic practice, commercial experience, and the crossover between the two. If you, in your position as boss, oversaw two identical projects concurrently, one was a commercial project and one was an academic project, what differences in approach and delivery would be immediately recognizable?
Well, the technology readiness level would obviously be much higher in industry, meaning that we would be looking at putting things into production much sooner. That means there would probably be systems, processes, and teams already in place to support the solution rollout and maintenance in production. The relationship with the end customer is also likely to be much closer and the requirements much better defined in industry projects. Now in academia, this is likely to be more of a blue sky research, so there usually needs to be more foundation work on setting up the right teams and setting out roles and responsibilities, more market research to understand the potential and identify the best use cases, and more business development work to identify the potential end users of the technology and the best delivery partners further down the line.
You've managed to successfully operate within both the commercial and the academic environment. Do you think that anyone can, if they learn the rules of the domain that is? Is this something that's achievable by anyone?
So basically the question is, what does it take to operate successfully both in academia and in industry?
Yeah.
I would say an open mindset, being flexible, being able to understand different drivers and adjust one's approach accordingly. As in every organization, there will be different chains of influence and decision-making, and being able to understand and navigate this is critical for success. As it takes special interest both on the research side and in commercial applications, I would say that curiosity as well as being results-driven is also very important.
Okay. So what are the biggest roadblocks to successful collaboration between industry and academia? What stops things working?
Well, I would say there are roadblocks on both sides, but the short answer I'd say is that red tape in academia is a big roadblock, and short-term thinking in industry. That's probably the top of my list.
Do you think that there's ever going to be a time when that isn't the case? Or are the worlds just too set in their ways to ever change?
Well, probably, but we are talking about very long timescales. And I think that, you know, if you look at academic industrial collaborations, like, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 decades ago, I think it was very, very different. Yeah. And I think that we've turned very much more entrepreneurial over the last years, and I expect this direction to kind of keep going, you know, as we move into the future. So I think that there will be changes, but they are very slow.
I always consider myself a slight outsider, because although I work heavily within the data industry, I see myself as much more from the human resources perspective. And to the point that you've just made there, we have more and more commercial influence within universities due to collaborative projects, if you like. And there seems to be more and more of an academic presence within the industry. You just need to look at the prevalence of, you know, PhDs going into industry and working and collaborating. It to me that there's a perfect world somewhere where these two worlds collide. But I don't know if we're ever going to reach it. Maybe it's always going to be somewhere over the rainbow. But I can hope that one day we get there. If you were able to take one thing, one technique or practice or principle or philosophy, would academia immediately benefit from adopting from the private sector, and vice versa?
Well, I'd say there is currently way too much bureaucracy in academia. So cutting through the red tape would bring many benefits. It would make it much easier to kick projects off, cut down on the research delivery time, collaborate with industry partners more effectively, to mention just a few. Industry, on the other hand, can get too bogged down with short-term thinking and too focused on delivering on the immediate features and hitting short-term KPIs. So investing in the big picture, longer-term planning, and an ambitious future vision could eventually help us build better products, both in short and in long term. So
we need to get some vice principals from universities into businesses, and we need to get some C-suite business people into universities and try and propagate ideas on both sides. Do you think that commercial management practices should change to get the best out of academically inclined data talent?
Well, that's a debatable question. As I mentioned before, industry is more result-oriented and more customer-focused and more financially aware. So there needs to be at least some interest in gaining business acumen in order to succeed in industry. This in turn means that academic practices like unlimited research time or being too focused on models and algorithms and not concerned about the end users or business goals, those practices are probably not the best fit in industry. That said, I would certainly encourage industry managers to avoid micromanaging top talent, provide plenty of autonomy and space for those brightest minds to pursue their own ideas, projects, and initiatives. And this could bring a fresh perspective into the business. And in the long run, this could bring a lot of value both to the company and to the individual.
It's something that I noticed in my brief foray into working within the academic world, and I had never spent any time other than being at university a long time ago, but I did notice that there seemed to be two very distinct personality types. There was the quiet and more insular individuals that formed kind of groups, and there seemed to be the more outgoing, gregarious individuals that formed other groups. And I often felt that commerce dealt very, very readily and easily with the latter group, the outgoing gregarious, but didn't make the necessary accommodation to get the best out of the slightly more insular. And I often thought how tiny little adjustments, just tiny little workplace adjustments would have brought the best out. And it's something that we perhaps need to look at. And I think when we look at big headlines like diversity and inclusion, we need to look at the individual involved in that not everybody thinks in the same way, not everybody behaves in the same way, not everybody communicates in the same way. And if we can, perhaps from a commercial perspective, make these slight adjustments to accommodate everybody, we will have more successful teams. Just a thought. How can industry leverage academia to drive innovation?
Well, I think there is a lot of potential for industry to leverage academia for joint research and development work. There is funding, talent, equipment, and other resources that could be very fruitful if approached with a strategic mind. From internships and longer-term fellowships to consulting projects and larger joint research projects, I think there is a plethora of opportunities to explore technologies and solutions long-term.
And to your point, I think if we were to look at the landscape 10, 15, 20 years ago, it's very different to what it is now. That there seems to be so much more opportunity to collaborate, and I think it's great. And I'm only looking at it, I suppose, through a pretty narrow lens of this part of the UK in particular. But I think worldwide we're in a much better place than we were maybe 30 years ago. Still a lot of work to be done, however. If someone from a commercial environment was interested in moving into an academic post, what would be the biggest difference that they would notice?
Well, I guess the amount of bureaucracy and consequently the pace at which the things are moving. So if someone wants to move from industry into academia, they need to be prepared and to see that things will be moving much, much slower, and it will take much longer time to kind of kick projects off and assemble the teams and deliver things. And sometimes just getting the approval for projects can take an extortionate amount of time. And
why is that from a layman's perspective? Is that to do with the necessity of the university to fully investigate and justify the work that they're doing? Is it to do with the teaching that spins out of research? Why does that bureaucracy exist?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure I could do a full root cause analysis, but There is lots of focus on justifying the funds.
Right. Okay.
And because there's so many potential projects, then the university management needs to at least try to ensure that the right projects are being prioritized. But then that means that, you know, the university management usually wants to see like big impactful projects, but I think that's at the detriment of smaller projects that could be very very useful in kicking off some bigger bigger projects further down the line. So yes, so it takes perhaps counterintuitively, but it can take just the same amount to get approval for a small project as it takes to get approval for some big project.
And my exposure to this, and I was blissfully unaware of how competitive universities are. And I only saw it from the teaching perspective, where universities in Scotland had to compete on an international scale to attract international students. So I take it it's exactly the same for the research side. It's competition on an international scale. So they have to be high profile. They have to be, the projects that they fund have to make immediate impact, make a big splash, be high profile, because they want to attract more research, because that research money can go anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay. Do you feel that there's a strong enough academic influence within commercial data organizations, or a strong enough commercial data focus within academic institutions? Is the balance right?
Well, at the very top level, meaning FANG companies like Facebook, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and the top universities like Oxbridge or University of Edinburgh, I think, yes, there is a kind of good synergy and good level of collaboration. But I think that much more needs to be done to level things up further down the chain.
What could be done then? What ideas would you have? Because I was talking to, and I'm trying to think who it was I was speaking to the other day, but it's somebody I know who'd been given a guest lectureship. Was going to be a visiting professor, as a commercial chap who's going to be going into universities and teaching. Could we be doing more of that? Could our data industry superstars be spending more time in the classroom?
Well, there is like different perspectives to look at this. Like if it's just about the government funding, for example, then the big question is, should the government be allocating more funds to make sure we are leveling up, and that all institutions are equally supported in pursuing top quality research. Or also from the industry side, you spoke about diversity earlier and inclusion. So, you know, if we want to make sure that we are getting a diverse talent, then we need to be reaching out to, you know, a diverse pool of institutions and not just top level universities. So I think that from the talent perspective, there is certainly a lot of benefit for companies to be collaborating with, you know, a wider pool of institutions and not just the very, very top.
What's the number one tip you would give to anyone thinking of transitioning for the next step in their career journey, either from industry to academia or vice versa?
Well, I would say to answer this question, but I think it also applies to a more general question of, you know, taking the next career step. Anyway, I think that a good introspection is really critical. It is important to understand your own drivers, motivations, ambitions, what energizes you or what depletes your energy, and understanding what you want may be the hardest part sometimes. And once you know what you want, it's much easier to get there. So once you've understood what you want of your career, you can then start carving out your next steps. What is the learning curve to get there? What are the gaps you need to fill in your CV, for example, in terms of projects, themes, results? Is there anyone in your network who can help you out with all that? And so on.
Thank you. Looking to the future for a minute, do you anticipate any significant change or development over the next few years with regards to that symbiotic relationship between data academia and commercial data organizations?
Mm-hmm. So we touched a little bit on this before, and that's a very interesting question. My guess is that with all the economic hardships that we are likely to be facing over the next few years, the funding from the governments will be more and more limited. And this means that academia will need to look more and more to industry for resources in order to be able to pursue top quality research. So they will need to adapt and be more commercially aware over the time. They might even cut down on some red tape.
I've thought about this. When you look at some of the firstly amazing academic institutions that we have in this little tiny space of the world, and then some of the amazing companies and organizations that we have in this tiny little space in the world. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if there was some kind of super campus where the companies all paid a little bit and the academic institutions brought their knowledge and expertise, and we had this amazing, I don't know what it would be, a brilliant, perfect world where it combined really, really well, where that relationship was built really, really strongly, and the best companies financed the best research. But then I remembered we lived in the real world. And one of the things that I really enjoy about our academic world is that it is not encumbered by commercial, how should we put it, pressures, that research can be carried out for research's sake, that not everything needs to be slave to P&L, to profit, to revenue generation. And I think that perfect world that I hope for might never exist. I don't know. I'm not sure, just conjecture. Final thoughts, Jasmina. If we could jump in the Wayback Machine and speak to yourself 20 years ago, what advice, based on what you now know, would you give yourself?
Well, in retrospect, I could have been more proactive about building up my soft skill set. Things like communication, influencing, building and maintaining relationships. So I could have probably been more deliberate about networking, seeking out mentors, seeking opportunities for teamwork, asking for feedback. So things like that.
Wise words to end things with. Dr. Jasmina Lazic, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. Thanks for sharing your passion, your knowledge, and your expertise on the theme of transitioning between academic and commercial data practice. I hope that you, dear listener, have enjoyed the conversation as much as I have. Please do look out for the other episodes in this podcast series, where I'm joined by other special guests to discuss other topics relevant to today's bosses in data. Visit www.mbnsolutions.com for resources like our UK Data Salary Survey 22, to watch recordings of our latest data meetup events, or to download our white papers, research and thought leadership. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram and Twitter for the latest news, views, opinions, and of course, hottest opportunities in the data space. Thanks again and goodbye.
Thank you. My pleasure.